or afternoon, depending where you are. Thanks for attending today. I'm excited to talk to you about this project that was funded through the South Big Data Hub at NSF. Yeah, so as Renata mentioned, so first off, so just quick introduction. I'm a senior fellow at the Urban Institute, which is a nonprofit institution, research institution based in Washington, D.C. I've been there for about 7 years. And as I was telling Renata before we started, I'm starting to now finally learn how to read my emails because when Kendra sent out the invitation for this, I saw the word record in the email and recorded this talk and then sent her the file. And she's like, why are you sending me this file? Why did you record this? Not realizing that the word record referred to our recording today. So we have multiple versions of this, but I'm going to give it to you live. So this is our Data for Kids project. This is a joint project between me and my urban associate colleague, Claire McKay-Bowen. Claire actually has a great book on data privacy. If you're interested, that you should definitely check out. And so what I'm going to do is walk you through where this came from and where this got started. So our motivating question is, how do we teach kids about data and data science and data visualization? And if you're on this call in these meetings, this is probably something that you are at least as passionate about as I am. I am not an educator of young kids, but I do have two, well, not so young anymore because one of them just got their driver's permit. So I'm terrified now, but of kids. So and I think if you're here, you probably agree that kids are going to be at least the data consumers of the future, if not the data producers. And the earlier we can help them learn more about being good data consumers, producers, and stewards, the better off we're going to be as a society. So how do we teach kids about data science? So in the classroom, and again, this is from my perspective, not as an educator of young kids. There are lots of projects about how we can get people to learn more about data. So there's a somewhat famous Dear Data project from designers Georgia Lupi and Stephanie Posovic, where basically you collect your own data and you draw a visualization of those data. And it can be, where you ate that week, your exercise, your music listening, who you talk to, whatever it is. And I've done this project many times in different formats with different classrooms and different clients. Just an example here. And basically, you collect your own data and you draw your visualization. And drawing the visualization gets you out of a lot of the constraints and challenges of actually using a computer. And you can see other people have done this as well. This is an example from the Data Visualization Society Nightingale blog, where someone talked about how they and their kids collected data and drew some visualizations. You see lots of examples of people working with kids to count things. Candy is a big one, obviously. I have some pictures of my daughter who every November 1st counts out her candy and draws little bar charts of it. When my kids were younger, I would go every year and teach a data visualization section in the fourth grade classrooms. And the way I would teach that class is I would do a relatively short lecture focusing primarily on maps, because kids in fourth grade, right? So that's sort of 8, 9 years old, they're all familiar with maps. That's a visualization type that they're familiar with. And so what I would ask them to do, I'd first talk about maps and talk about data visualization, and then I would ask them to draw a map of one floor in your home, and they can all do that. And then we would add some data to that. So I'd give them a little bit of piece of tracing paper and ask them to think about some data and draw the data, encode the data on the map. So where do they spend the most time? Where do they eat? How do they travel between the classroom or between the rooms? And they get really excited about this because it's their own experience. It's something that they can draw. It's a map, and it's their own experience, right? They can think about where they spend a lot of time, or where they read, or where they watch TV, or where they play video games in their home. And you can see here that, they really do start thinking about different types of ways to encode the data. And then I have a little card game on my website that I bring to elementary school, and we play this card game. And of course, when you sort of combine the tactile piece of learning plus competition, especially for 4th, 5th, 6th graders, you really start to get into some exciting pieces in the classroom. Okay, so now we hit the pandemic. And what do we do about teaching kids data and data science online? And there's been some experiments and some research about using data science virtually and teaching kids code. For example, the MIT project is one of the most famous ones, teaching kids how to code using Scratch. There are some projects about using data visualization on apps. When the pandemic started, I kicked off a little what I call the Data at Urban Digital Discussion Series, which was just conversations with people in the data space, trying to keep conversations happening even in that early time. And we carved out a week in that series of conversations to focus on teaching kids, about data science and virtually in the virtual classrooms. And so I did a session on teaching kids about making data visualizations, and Claire did a section on teaching kids about data privacy and thinking carefully about data. And that really spurred us to apply to the S.E.E.D.S fund through the South Big Data Hub to create a bigger project that we think will be useful to especially to teachers and educators. So that's the sort of origins of this project. So what did we do? Or what are our goals to start? So our goal is to help educators prepare kids to be better data consumers and data stewards. And we wanted to create a toolkit that would help them do so. And of course, we wanted to make this as easy as possible for the educators to get and to use immediately in the classroom. And so the grant enabled us to do that and enabled us to work with a number of different collaborators to create this across the South Big Data Hub space. So here are our 7 collaborators, as you can see, from a variety of different areas. We have a little icon here for you, and I'm going to get to that in a moment, but we do not view this project as a one and done. We're hoping that this project is going to continue and to expand over time. And so we had several meetings with our collaborators and ended up settling on what ultimately is this Data for Kids platform. Okay, so what is the Data for Kids platform? So we have a number of what we call data stories. And when you go to the project, you can, as an educator, you can use the data stories, or if you want to become a collaborator, you can fill out this Google form or just connect with us any way you want and build your own data story. And we've tried to build all of the pieces in this project to be very modular, so that it's pretty easy for anyone to really create a data story, and then of course for the educators to actually use them. So I'll come back to that in a second. All right, so each data stories has 3 primary aspects to it. We're thinking specifically about different grade bands, about different age groups. We're going to ask the educators and then of course the kids 5 questions, primary questions or question areas, and then we're going to give them 4 sets of materials. Okay, so first on the grade bands. So we are thinking very differently about kids in different grades, different ages, right? So kids who are grades 3 to 5, so that's instead of that 7 to 9 years old range, what we're thinking here for these kids is just basic literacy and basic information in these data stories. So for example, we have a data story about national parks, and we have information about all the national parks in the country. And so for the youngest kids, the questions are something like, how many national parks are there? How many national parks are there in the state of California? How many national parks are there in your specific state, right? So it's really just more on basic counting, basically reviewing the data. The grades, the 6 to 8, the sort of middle school age kids. So that's kind of like 11, 12, 13. Now we can start to look at measures of dispersion. So, what's the average number of national parks in each of the states? What is the range of square miles or square acres of the national parks in a certain state or in your state? And then we get to the oldest kids, the high school kids, where now we're starting to talk about relationships and correlations. What is the relationship between national parks and median income in a particular state? Or when we look at food insecurity, we have another story on food insecurity. What is the relationship between the number of or the poverty rate and the school lunch program? Because kids are going to learn and are going to be prepared to learn differently at each of these age groups. So for each of the stories, we have 5 different sections. We have the underlying data questions. So we are setting this up. Again, we're trying to make this as easy as possible for the teachers to use right away, right? So that they can just download the Google slide. I'll show you all the materials in just a moment. They can download the Google slides. They can open up and start teaching right away. So we have laid out for them the data question. We have questions about how the data are collected, and for the kids to start thinking about how are the data collected, and does it make sense? Then we get into the data analysis. And again, we're breaking this across these three bands. So we have priming questions for the youngest kids. How many national parks are in your state, right? And so we break that out across these three bands. Then we have data visualization. So we have a whole section on building graphs, building tables with these data. And again, it's going to vary based on the different bands. And then there's a final section about data equity and ethics, which is an area that I spend a lot of time working on, and an area on data privacy and security that Claire spends a lot of time working on. And these are really priming questions to get kids to start thinking about where are the data collected, how are they collected, and what pieces might we be missing, or what we are misrepresenting. Because if your data set is based on 12 observations, that's a very different, your conclusions might be very different than if your data set has 1,200 observations. We also have 4 sets of materials. And again, the idea here is to make this as easy and as actionable as possible for the teachers. So we have an instructor's guide, which walks through these things in great detail, and it provides images of all the slides in the slides. So we'll talk about that in a second, so that you literally can just walk through. So my kids, I live in Fairfax County in Northern Virginia. So my kids, they use Google Classroom in Fairfax. So we provided everything in the Google Suite and in the Microsoft Suite. So the instructor's guide, there's a Google Doc, there's a Word doc. The data, we have a clean version, and then we also have a messy version where we've actually added some errors into the data set. So when the kids go in and they're looking at poverty rate, and the poverty rate is 1,200% for some state, they have to think about what's going on there, why that might be wrong. And we provide that in a Google Doc, a Google Sheet, Excel, and CSV files. There's obviously a data dictionary that describes in detail all of the fields. So again, Google Sheet and a Word doc, Google Doc and a Word document. And then again, there are teaching slides. So there are Google slides, and there's a PowerPoint slide, so that they can use all that right away. So here's just one example. This is our project on food insecurity. You can see there's a little paragraph that sort of sets the stage right at the top, and the educators can go in, they can get everything in one shot if they go to that Google Drive folder, or they can download each of these pieces individually, going through each of these different pieces. So we created that, we put that out at the end of December. And then in January, when people started coming back from their break, we really started promoting this. This is just one of 2 Twitter threads that I pulled together. I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, 157 likes on a Twitter thread about a new website that provides material to teach kids about data is pretty good. I'm happy with that. Did another one a few weeks later to really dive into one of the particular stories. And then we were invited to write a number of different blog posts. So we wrote one blog post for the Nightingale blog over Data Visualization Society. We wrote sort of a behind the scenes blog for the Data at Urban, which is the Urban Institute sort of behind the scenes tech data blog. And then we also did a couple of interviews, one for EdSurge. I mean, I love the title here, Can Third Graders Learn Data Science? And these researchers, me and Claire, we definitely say yes to that. So that was pretty exciting to see it picked up. So like I said, we don't view this as one and done. We are thinking about the future. So we are actively looking for collaborators. We have 3 people currently working on data stories that they are hopefully going to contribute to this project. We want to try to carve out some more time on our own to create some more stories. Haven't really been able to do that just yet, but we're trying to do that. So we really want to broaden this particular project so that we can have more content on there. We also are trying to document experiences. This is always a hard one. We want to see if educators are using the materials, and if they are using them, what was their experience, and what was good about it, and what might need to be improved about it. And then as we start to move back into the real world, getting into the classroom, we are thinking in the fall about actually getting into the classroom and maybe working with some of this content with kids. And before the pandemic, like I mentioned, I was doing this in my kids' elementary school, and would love to get back to that. So we're really excited about this project. We're really thankful to the South Big Data Hub for supporting it, and I'll just close by saying, if you are interested in contributing and collaborating with us, please reach out, please head over there. And there's lots of materials that you can see that you can just download and insert your own little data story. And we're happy to help you create those different pieces and that different content and get that onto the site. So thank you so much. And I will turn it back over to Renata.
Thank you. No, that was great, John. I think it's great materials. Are there any questions for John right now, or questions you put? No, so go ahead.
Hey, John, Noel Mazade with the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I guess three questions. Have you explored having an affiliation with a specific school district where you would embed this resource at all three levels as a whole by, if you will, WHOLE by relationship? Second question, could this be a resource, and could there be a relationship developed between a university-based school of education, which is training would-be teachers how to teach math and data, that this could be either workshopped within the university or an actual course that's teaching future teachers the skill of doing what you've developed here? And third, many school districts use high school students and some junior high students, I'm sure that's true up where you are, as tutors to other kids, peer tutoring. Could this be a resource for those tutors? Here endeth my questions.
Thanks, Noel. Those are great questions. So the short answer is no, but there's a slightly longer answer. No to so the short answer is no to all three of those, but a slightly longer answer. So I did have a plan to work with my kids' elementary school, and we actually had a research plan to actually use some of these materials earlier before we actually pulled this all together in this project, but actually use some data science materials and actually do an evaluation. So the plan, we actually had a full proposal and we actually had permission to do it, but then the pandemic hit and sort of everything fell apart. But basically the idea was we were going to split this into 3 classrooms. We were going to do in one classroom just the lecture, another classroom the lecture and the card game, and another classroom the lecture, the card game, and another exercise which we had already planned, and then to come back and then quiz the kids and maybe come back a few months later and quiz them again. And we actually were ready to do that, and then the pandemic hit and that sort of all fell apart. I think it's a great idea to partner with a school of education. It's not my field, so although my mom did teach in the School of Education, the University of Buffalo, which is where I'm from. So actually that might actually work really well. And then on the tutoring part, it's funny you mentioned that. My daughter is actually works with, there are 2 kids in her high school who have started a virtual tutoring project. I'll grab the link in a minute. And I've actually talked to her about using some of these materials in her work with some of the kids that she tutors. She tutors kids. She's in 9th grade. She's tutoring kids that are in 5th and 6th grade. So we've actually had some conversations with them about using it. And we are, one of our collaborators is the CEO of the Concord Coalition, Concord Group, which I'm sure some folks here know. And so we're still consortium. Thank you, Sam. We're talking with them about doing some more work there, and also with the American Statistical Association to see how we can broaden the reach of this work. So these are all great ideas. I'll hold on to them. I think the working with the University School of Education is a great idea. And if you have connections, Noel, folks, I'd love to talk more about how we might do that.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm in the office of the Vice Chancellor for Research and Engagement, so I will get back to you.
Right.
We're actually working with the school district now on technology-enabled coaching. So I see a relationship there. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And I see Nick, you had your hand up, and then there were two questions in the chat. So go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, John, I just want to thank you for a really great project and a really great presentation. I'm very excited about these areas, particularly as they're kind of moving into less formal aspects of education, and in bringing in folks like, you and others at the Urban Institute to kind of tie in these broader conversations. I put in a link after the speaker links to a workshop that just got announced. It's taking place September 13th and 14th at the National Academies, that's focused on K-12 data science education. There's a lot of things happening in that realm. There's a lot of controversies, which may be a different conversation, but I think it's a really important time, and I wanted just to alert people that's going to be open to the public, and participation is really encouraged.
Great.
And this is
Thanks,
good
Nick.
too. There's a couple of people that aren't here today that are focused, but that come to the working group often, that are focused on K-12. So we can send that
Yeah.
around, Nick, if that's all right. Is it a close or is it open?
Yeah, I just put the link to my the tutoring group my daughter works with in the link. I'll put that in the Etherpad too. So
And we might have a chance for, but I'm just going to read some of. So I think some of them are statements and suggestions in the chat. Should we see, John, about other places to present? So Patty is talking about, S.E.E.D.S and also Computer Science Teaching Association from Mark, expanding computer education pathways. But Sam, do you want to say your question, or as you said, have you considered describing the design principles you use to introduce the various data topics?
Yeah, it's sort of a meta question, around so many teachers need a great deal of support, and sometimes being very explicit about how you've chosen to structure things, and you probably do it in your teacher's notes. But just as frequently as possible, when we can articulate sort of the assumptions we're using and the model and research that we're building on, it can really drive sort of effective practice and implementation.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I would say that we really relied pretty heavily on our collaborators, because they do this work all the time, right? And they are working with kids. They are in the virtual classroom, I would say. So we heavily relied on them. And I think for the most part, Claire and I view ourselves as the conveners for this project and the motivators for this project. But all of these groups that you're mentioning are great. And I'm gonna, I think I have a bunch of proposals to send out in the next couple of weeks.
And I see Mark, you have a hand up, but real quick, also there's a group that I will find you, Zarek, that comes at the University of Chicago, that's specifically looking at convening a group around K-12 educators, trying to get them involved in data science. So they've spent a lot of time convening educators that are interested in adding data science into their work. So we can look for that group and put it in the hat as well, and try to connect you to. I think it would be very synergistic, since they are working with getting educators interested and kind of districts interested, and you have curriculum.
Yeah, that would be great, Renata. I mean, I think the other thing that and this is just an issue with urban in general, but I think urban has so much data and so many people doing such great research that we have, I would say, sort of an untapped resource here that we haven't really been able to get into. I mean, I think many people here probably understand, if I go and ask, Bob so-and-so to help us build a data story, Bob's response is, okay, so what's the project code? How am I getting paid for this? So that's the challenge, is to get people engaged. So, that's just another thing that we have to consider. And that's why we sort of opened this up, because we feel like I did an interview about this yesterday, and they were asking me about this card game and why, do I not try to sell it more? And I'm like, well, the market for data visualization, data science for young kids, is really more, feels more organic. It feels more sort of that Etsy level. Like the things that you see up there are people teaching their kids how to make a bar chart out of M&Ms, or how to look at the world in a way that's data driven by collecting their own data. And so, but I think there's a more formal way to do this. And that's, sort of what, that's our sort of like next step thinking.
Mm-hmm. So Mark, do you want to ask you had your hand up for the last question, and then we will go to Nick for the next talk.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to share that I have a chapter 2 computer science teacher association in the US Virgin Islands. So one way to connect directly, you should contact your chapter in your state. Yeah, and they are interested, and they're organizing every year. Like there is a conference in Chicago now. You can present a workshop, in data science for kids. So it's a way to connect to thousands of teachers at one meeting. Yes. So if you want this project to eventually to start very quickly and to continue, yes, connect to the Computer Science Teacher Association. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I'm putting all these in my list. Yeah, these are great. Well, thank you all so much. And like I said, if you I'll put my email in the note. Well, it's in the Etherpad, but I'll put it here as well. If you have any other comments, questions, suggestions for or connections to make, please do reach out. I'm always looking to expand this project. So Renata, thank you.
Thank you, John.
And Renata,
right. Yes, go ahead.
I would suggest the task force could have a more productive conversation about this if we actually convened at Mark's place at the University of the Virgin Islands. Could we not?
I agree. I think it would be so much more productive in person Virgin Islands meeting.
Yeah, I'm waiting for you this weekend. Anytime, guys. So.
Yeah, that'll be 2023 goals. We'll try that
in December.
December.